Hello, Phil Morse at digitaldjtips.com. Today we're looking at the Reloop Serato controller, the Terminal Mix 8. I'm going to give you a quick overview of this unit, then we're going to take a deep dive and look at some of the features that make it stand out from other similar units, and then at the end we're going to decide if it's the controller for you. So let's have a quick overview. Any of you who are familiar with Reloop's controllers will instantly recognize the look of this. It's really well made, solid metal unit, excellent jog wheels. Very similar to the Terminal Mix 2 and 4 in build quality, which is to say excellent. The difference between it and those two controllers is that the Terminal Mix 2 only has 2 physical channels, and the Terminal Mix 4 has the 4 channels but doesn't have the performance pads, which are of course pretty trendy right now. Nearly all high-end controllers nowadays have these performance pads. So the stuff that stands out about it are these really nice, low, huge jog wheels, very responsive, excellent to use, really gorgeous, long pitch fader, great for manual beat matching, and the controls down here, really nice rubberized backlit transport controls. The EQs, filters, gains, everything you'd expect is here. You know, it's fully featured. Down the middle there's all the volume controls, there's a booth output as well as a master output. Really nice Reloop library control like on most of their controllers, and lots of buttons around there for things like preparing your tracks, having a prepare window open, and cycling through the various views and the various extra add-on functions of Serato. So they've been careful to make sure that most stuff is on there. And one thing I do like about Reloop is the way the shift button works. They think hard about how they're going to use shift. I'll show you some of that stuff in a minute. So there's the booth output and the master output and the sample volume down here, also the Q mix. Along the front there's a microphone input, there's one auxiliary input, so this is really a software controller. It's designed for people who want to DJ with software. If you want a controller that's a standalone mixer where you plug lots of external things in, a couple of mic channels and all that stuff, it's not the one for you. If you are more of a software DJ who occasionally wants to use a microphone or have a backup system plugged in, then it's going to be more suitable for you. There's all the usual crossfader curve, crossfader assign stuff going on down here. There's a tone control on the Q on the headphones, which is nice. Also a tone control on the microphone. So overall, it's a pretty fully featured software controller. What I'd like to do now is show you some of those features that do stand it out a little bit from other controllers in its bracket. So let's start by looking at the performance modes and the performance pads and what's different on here to other controllers. I'll demonstrate a couple of things and talk you through some of the others. So I'm going to start off by going to the slicer mode. Slicer takes an 8-beat section of the tune and cycles through it by freezing it on the screen and showing you on the screen which beat is corresponding to the light that is sequencing through here. And then you can play the beats by pressing these pads, and it'll continue to hold time underneath, so when you stop it's continuing, a bit like a slip mode. So let me show you. You can hear it's continuing underneath despite what I do, and the lights will show you when it's come back to the beginning as well, so you can be quite clear what's going on. So a nice way of chopping things up while still holding the rhythm underneath. Slice mode is one of those things that you want to practice on the tunes that you're interested in using it on, because otherwise you can make a bit of a racket. Let's look at the loop mode. This is a loop roll function, so it does the classic and you can hear underneath the tunes continuing to play as before. You can adjust it so that the highest or the longest length is 32 beats or 16 beats or whatever you want, and same here, so you can have a shorter, lower one. You do it on the software. Well implemented on here. One of the things on here which is different to other performance pads is this dual mode. So if I wanted to put the cues on, by the way, cues are pretty much as you'd imagine. Press the cue button and you can set cues by pressing these. They're all differently coloured, which is nice, corresponding to the colours on the Serato screen, so very easy to see which cue you've got. To turn the cues off, you press shift and cancel them like this. But if you wanted to, for instance, combine the loop mode and the cue mode by pressing those two together, You now have the top ones as cues. So you've got 4 cues here that you can define, while keeping the loop going on down here. And it's the same with sample and loop or sample and cue. So you can kind of set the pads to use 2 different things, which I really liked. The sampler gives you 6 sample slots, and then these 2 buttons here will cycle through the 4 banks. So 24 samples to be controlled there with the sample volume here. Pretty good control over the sampler. You're still going to be using the trackpad a lot. There's no controller that really does the SP6 sampler brilliantly, as I said earlier. But that's not a bad attempt at that. Let's have a look at the VU meters and how these work. So my gain control here is showing on the VU. There's a switch around the back which will put the VUs to master output. So this is now showing the master output on the VU. I'm playing quite quietly, so they're not very high, but there you go. But you need to press that switch. If you want to be able to monitor your channels, you need to get around the back and press that switch. I don't see why they couldn't have done it in a more intuitive way. So when you press your channel button, your cue button, this switches to cue mode, and when it's turned off, it goes back to master. That's how some people do it. Not a big point, but just something worth pointing out. The manual looping, for those of you who like to loop manually, don't worry about that. You press this again, you've now got a full manual loop with in, out, and reloop and so on there. So there's no problem with manual looping. I wanted to show you some of the shift functions because I think the shift functions are particularly good, as I mentioned earlier, on Serato controllers. So let's look at some of those. Well, to start with, if you press shift and cue, straight back to the middle of to the beginning of the tune. I mean, how awesome is that? How many controllers make it hard for you to get back to the beginning of the tune? So that's really nice. Shift and play is your sensor mode, like this. It's going backwards. But it's got that slip functionality, so when you take your hands off there, it doesn't carry on playing from where it had gone backwards to, but from where it would have been had you not done that. So that's really nice. And there's lots and lots of other nice shift functions on the shift layer. You can press shift and the deck effects assign button here to change the range of these lovely pitch faders. Shift and 2 there does the key. If you press shift and this, you get a massive scrub all the way through the track really quickly. So shift and the jog wheel takes you through the track really nice and quickly. On the effects sections, which are very standard, the effects sections are exactly as you'd expect for nearly all controllers. But if you press shift and hold down an effects button, it will let you dial through all the available effects, saving you having to use the drop down on the screen. And the other thing I wanted to point out while we're just looking, deep diving at some of the functions, is this knob here. Now, normally on an effects section on a Serato controller, you'll have the 3 knobs to control an effect each, or various parameters of the selected effects if you're daisy chaining them. And then this is going to control the beats. It's going to control how often the effects cycle around. On this controller, it does that if you press the shift button. If you don't, you've got this kind of instant loop. So really expressive. Instant loop going on there, which I think is really nice. It's a nice double use of that control, and typical of what I've said a few times, that they've got a nice set of extra functions here using the shift button. So there you have it. Who's it for? Well, if you want the most all-singing, all-dancing controller it's possible to get for Serato, it's not quite there because you can buy things like the Pioneer DDJ SZ or SZ for our stateside friends, which is undeniably full of featured, more standalone stuff. You can use it as a DVS system at the heart of a DVS system for Serato and so on. Also costs like 3 times the amount, you know, so make your judgments. If you want something that is more suited to mobile DJing, which again you have like really good microphone channels and stuff like that on it, then something like the Denon MC6000 Mark II for Serato DJ probably be a better bet for you. Much smaller, loses all this performance pad goodness, but for mobile guys it's probably more suited. If you're a software DJ and you want the best overall performance with Serato DJ, then this is pretty much getting there. There are no Serato controllers that fully control the SP6 sample player yet. This does a good job, you know, you've got the pads for triggering samples and so on, but there's a lot of stuff you're going to need to rely on the keyboard for and the trackpad. But nonetheless, this, as far as any controllers go right now, this does the best job of that. But overall, it's got pretty much everything that any of the best Serato DJ controllers have, at least as far as software control go. And Reloop's clever use of the shift functions and the shift layer means that it's actually very intuitive to use in lots of ways that some of the guys haven't really come close to yet. So I can thoroughly recommend it if you are basically a software DJ who wants a fully featured controller with all the performance bells and whistles that you're ever likely to use. Frankly, there's more here than I would ever use. It's just got, you know, it's piles and piles and piles of stuff. There is months, if not years, of understanding and fun to be had before you feel like you've outgrown a controller like this, if you ever do outgrow it. So there you go, the Reloop Serato controller Terminal Mix 8, and the full review of this is over at digitaldjtips.com if you happen to be watching this away from that website. Thanks for watching, see you next time.